We're going to talk a little Florida Gator recruiting. Gators were one of the hottest recruiting teams coming out of 2025, but in 26, Corey Bender with Gators Online, they only have one commitment. But this weekend, we got a big visit weekend in Gainesville. Who's maybe a target or two that you think the Gators could land? Maybe not this weekend, but land them.
Yeah, I think overall you got to look in the secondary. I think Chauncey Kendon out of Sarasota Booker is one of them. He last visited he visited this spring, but before that, the last time he was on campus was for the season opener against Miami. Obviously, that game didn't go too well, so Florida kind of slid down his list in recent months. Then they had coaching changes in the secondary, but then Deron Wilson, the new secondary coach, came on board, was able to convince Kendon to come on campus. Made a really good first impression on him. And then not long after that, Florida landed in his top 6 and got an OV set for this weekend. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing to mention, too, is when he went down to school not that long ago, we spent about 6 to 7 hours there and really showed his camp that, hey, we're serious about recruiting. I know obviously it's going to be an uphill battle. Schools like Miami, Georgia, LSU, Auburn, Florida State, a lot of schools in the mix. But Florida's kind of been rising over the last month or so. They obviously have some ground to make up. But I think this weekend can go, saw Florida finish last cycle as well. They may have fell short earlier in the year, but they kept their foot on the gas pedal, finished with a really, really good class. I think he's one of them. And then the other one is obviously Justice Fitzpatrick, a DB out of Fort Lauderdale, St. Thomas Aquinas. And he's working with less schools, probably around 5 right now. But I think there's more kind of mystique in his recruitment as far as who's really ahead. I know there's been some buzz with the nearby Miami Hurricanes. They're in the mix. A lot of big-name schools. But he visited, just like Kendon, he visited in the spring, met with Deron Wilson. His family loved his coaching style and how detail-oriented he was as far as his teaching technique and stuff like that. And, after that one visit, he told me, he's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to take an OV to Florida. Billy Napier's heavily involved in that recruitment too, reaching out to his family every week. So I think those are 2 guys where Florida's playing catch-up with right now. But when you consider proximity and how good their spring visits went, I think over time, Florida can definitely kind of make a move for them.
All right, so the headliner of this big visit weekend has got to be physically Felix Ojo. I mean, he is just massive. He's also the only 5-star on campus this weekend, trending heavily to Texas on the recruiting prediction machine. But if I were to peg one out-of-state team that has a great shot at landing him, I think it's the Florida Gators. How have they gotten a foot in the door in Ojo's recruitment?
Yeah, man. So it's another guy. They kind of jumped in late. Jonathan DeCoster, the co-offensive line coach at Florida, he's been relentless in Florida's pursuit. Even he came for the orange and blue game. That was his first visit to Florida. And before that, the month prior, they were just kind of always, their foot was on the gas pedal, just trying to get him on campus. They were able to do that. But even after the orange and blue game, we weren't too optimistic because he wanted to make a commitment before the end of summer. And I hate to use the term hat on the table, but that's kind of like what the vibe was with him. Like, hey, he likes Florida, but it's going to be not enough time to play catch up. And then I think this official visit weekend, it started with him because Florida typically doesn't do OVs this early. And I think with a talent like that, especially with Ojo having a full list of OVs in June, they kind of had to kind of readjust their thinking as far as like, hey, if we have to get this guy on campus, we have to really change stuff around. We can't just kind of just be stuck on our plan. So they said, hey, let's just make an official visit weekend and get him in May 16th. And he was by himself on the calendar for a while. And then over the last couple of weeks, a lot of these big name guys joined him on the list. So I think with Ojo, he's the one that kind of made this official visit weekend. Florida decided to change things up. They said, hey, we just got to get him on campus no matter what. And I think right now it's one of those guys, even if Florida doesn't get later this summer, I think they're going to keep their foot on the gas and try to get him. Florida wants to sign 5 offensive linemen this cycle, and they're telling him, hey, you can come in. We're replacing a lot of guys after this year. We think you could be a day one early contributor, and that's something obviously any player wants to hear. But like you said, Josh, Texas, the Ohio States of the world, they're probably in a better spot right now. So I think Florida overall probably has to knock it out of the park this weekend.
Speaking of knock it out of the park, 4-star edge Luke Wafle, he's going to be in town, number 1 prospect in the state of New Jersey, number 51 overall. He's borderline 5-star prospect, and he's been making the rounds. He's been taking a lot of visits. What does UF have to do this weekend with Wafle?
Yeah, man, when I look at the official visit list, I think he's the one guy that's probably the least likely, just in my opinion. Florida got him on campus this spring. They offered him on the visit. So, a lot of other big schools were already high on his list. And I think overall they were able to OV and obviously be able to get him in this weekend. But his brother plays at Penn State. You have all these other big schools on his list. He's another kid who has a lot of OVs on the calendar coming up. So
Yeah.
I think right now, obviously, it's obviously a big sign to get him on campus. I think another thing, too, is Steve Spurrier Jr., who's now on Florida staff. He actually was a roommate with Wafle's dad. Believe it was at Duke back in the day. So there is some familiarity there.
Mm-hmm.
They like the culture that Billy Napier's instilling on campus. But when you look at the big picture, especially with all these other schools slated to get OVs after Florida, I think it's a pretty big long shot, but you just never know in recruiting.
All right, the last big name I want to talk to you about, and there's more, go to gatorsonline.com for the full list of visitors that are going to be in Gainesville. But I want to talk wide receiver Calvin Russell, because I was talking to Chad Simmons earlier today about Russell. And, he was saying it's not necessarily a head-to-head battle with UF and Miami. It might be Georgia and Miami here. Does UF have room to make up as they head into this visit weekend? Inside Scoop listeners, I got to tell you about a company that makes this show possible. It's Rhoback Activewear. The only way to describe Rhoback is best fit, best feel. And for those who are not familiar with Rhoback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs, clean hoodie, and quarter zip designs from some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They are both super comfortable. They have an elastic waistband and a great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for everyday movement. Rhoback also has been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. So use code JOSH on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off all new custom orders through the end of this week. Let's spell it out for you. RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with promo code JOSH.
Yeah, no, it's funny. When I look at the list, he's kind of like the dark horse guy as far as like who I could see Florida making a move for. He doesn't do many interviews, so it's hard to get a gauge on him. And I know guys in Miami, I believe his mom attended there, and I don't know what sport she played, but you have Syracuse that's heavily in the mix. So it's kind of one of those lists you look at where I think any school can maybe slip up to the top or in the next month and a half. But yeah, no, it's a guy, 6'6". Billy Gonzalez loves the big body wide receivers, guys that can go up and kind of high point the ball. Dallas Wilson comes to mind from last cycle. So yeah, and I think he's a big priority for Florida. I know they're definitely going to be rolling out the red carpet for him. I definitely would put them behind probably the Miamis, the Georgia, and Syracuse. Yeah, I think those three schools probably are definitely ahead of Florida right now. But I think, the SEC appeal, being in the state of Florida, and I know Florida, one thing they always do a good job is really impressing the family as a whole on these OVs. I know his mother will be up there. Remember Javari Flowers, who's his teammate at Miami Northwestern. He recently signed with Florida. There's a familiar face up there, so that's something to keep in mind. But, yeah, I think Florida has ground to make up, man. But I think when you and I reconnect the next time, he could be a guy that could be, rising with Florida, and mutual interest could really be rising because he's an elite talent, and I know Florida really wants him in the class.
All right, so UF sitting with one commitment. I'm a little surprised just at the strength of UF's momentum coming out of that 2025 cycle. Will Griffin committed, very good quarterback, number 17 overall in the country. Are you a little surprised that they don't have more commits? Is there any reason for concern?
Yeah, no, it's surprising. It's definitely, just Florida should probably recruit itself. From the academic standpoint, I think you hit it on the head, Josh. The way they finished last cycle on the field and in recruiting, you would kind of think that would have carried over more as far as where we're at. But at one point, they did have around 5 guys. It's kind of crazy. You think USC has like over 25. It's like hard to compare them to anyone. Right. But they did have Jalen Waters, who obviously flipped to Miami, and that was because of a coaching change at Florida. Devin Jackson was in the class for a while. He decommitted. I think he could very well end up back in Florida's class. Mm-hmm. Isaiah Williams, we can have a whole show on that whole situation.
He made a stop.
Yeah. So that was so obviously that was one. Obviously he's committed. He's an elite talent. So we just, even him, I know he's made 5 commitments, but we haven't heard anything that makes us believe that Florida is going to stop recruiting him.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's a guy Florida really wants. He loved Florida as a kid.
Wow.
And obviously Will Griffin, he has the family ties to Florida. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at it, man, you would think that they would have more commits at this time. But I think the other part is too, getting through spring. So many of these kids are so close to taking all these OVs. And I think a lot of them, I mean, when you're a big name school like Florida, you're competing against the top guys who obviously are pretty NIL focused. And there's a lot that goes into these decisions. You compare all the schools you're going on, all these visits you're going on. So I think when you get through the spring, they're like, hey, man, like, why commit now when I'm about to take these OVs in a month? So it's kind of like you're in that weird window where it's like, unless you're really cemented as like the number
Mm-hmm.
one school, a lot of these kids are going to be like, well, man, I'm so close to OVs. Let me just take them just to make sure. But yeah, man, I would have thought even in January, February time, March, they would have got a few more guys on board. But I think by the time the end of summer rolls around, because I
Right.
think you look at Florida's big board, they're trending for a lot of big name kids. It's just been a slower start than usual. So I think that by the end of summer, it should pick up quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think by the time official visits roll around in June, end of June, we're going to see some more additions to this class. Thank you, Corey Bender, for joining us. Go check out Gators Online. They do a heck of a job covering Florida Gator football and recruiting.